The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as Catherine Middleton stepped out of the sleek black car, her heart racing with nervous excitement. She had visited royal residences before, but something about this particular invitation felt different. The way William had looked at her when he extended the invitation, the subtle change in his voice, the lingering touch of his hand on hers, everything suggested this weekend would mark a turning point in their relationship. Catherine smoothed down her navy blue dress, a simple yet elegant piece she had chosen after hours of deliberation. She wanted to look perfect, not just for William, but for the significance of this moment. The castle's imposing towers seemed to watch her every move as she walked through the entrance, flanked by guards who nodded respectfully. The weight of centuries of royal history pressed down upon her shoulders, yet she felt strangely at peace. William had been planning this weekend for months, though Catherine didn't know it yet. He had spoken with his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, about his intentions, and the elderly monarch had given her blessing with a knowing smile. "Love finds a way, William," she had told him, her eyes twinkling with memories of her own courtship with Prince Philip. "And, sometimes, it needs a little help from the right setting." The prince had chosen Windsor not just for its romantic atmosphere, but for its deep connection to his family's heritage. This was where his grandparents had spent their happiest moments, where countless royal love stories had unfolded across the generations. If he was going to take the next step with Catherine, he wanted it to be surrounded by the echoes of enduring love. As Catherine was escorted through the state apartments, she couldn't help but marvel at the opulence surrounding her. The walls were adorned with priceless paintings, each one telling a story of power, passion, and legacy. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks from the ornate ceilings, casting rainbows across the polished marble floors. Yet despite the grandeur, there was an intimacy to the castle that surprised her. Perhaps it was the way the afternoon light filtered through the ancient windows, or the soft sounds of her footsteps echoing in harmony with centuries of others who had walked these same paths. William was waiting for her in the oak drawing room, his tall frame silhouetted against the massive windows that overlooked the long walk. He turned as she entered, and the smile that spread across his face made her breath catch. There was something different about him here, in this place that was so fundamentally part of who he was. The usual weight of public scrutiny seemed to lift from his shoulders, replaced by a confidence and ease she had rarely seen. "You made it," he said, crossing the room to take her hands in his. The gesture was simple, but the warmth in his touch spoke volumes. "I was beginning to worry you might change your mind." Catherine laughed, the sound bright and natural in the formal surroundings. "And miss the chance to see you in your natural habitat?" "Never." Her teasing tone masked the deeper emotion stirring within her. Being here with him felt like stepping into a fairy tale, yet it was grounded in something very real and very precious. They spent the afternoon exploring the castle grounds, William sharing stories and memories that brought the ancient stones to life. He showed her the private gardens where he had played as a child, the hidden alcoves where he had sought solace during difficult times, the secret passages that had fascinated him for years. With each revelation, Catherine felt herself falling deeper under the spell of both the place and the man beside her. As evening approached, they found themselves in the castle's private chapel, a small, intimate space that seemed to glow with golden light. The walls were lined with memorials to generations of royals, but, rather than feeling morbid, the atmosphere was one of continuity and hope. William stood quietly beside Catherine, watching as she studied a particular memorial to a long-dead prince and princess whose love story had become legend. "They were married for 62 years, William said softly, following her gaze. "Through wars, scandals, political upheaval, everything that could tear a couple apart. But they never wavered in their commitment to each other." Catherine turned to look at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "What made them so strong, do you think?" William considered the question carefully, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I think they understood that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. Even when it's difficult, even when the world is watching and waiting for you to fail." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Catherine felt the moment's significance settling around them like a warm embrace. This wasn't just a casual weekend away, this was William sharing the deepest part of himself with her, opening the door to a future she had hardly dared to imagine. Dinner that evening was served in one of the castle's smaller dining rooms, lit by candles and warmed by a crackling fire. The table was set for two, with fine china and crystal that had been used by royals for generations. Yet the atmosphere was surprisingly cozy and intimate, as if they were simply two people in love sharing a meal, rather than a prince and a commoner navigating the complexities of their relationship. William had arranged for their favorite foods to be prepared, dishes that held special meaning from their courtship. There was the chocolate mousse from their first official date, the wine they had shared during their university days, the simple roasted chicken that reminded them both of quiet dinners in his Anglesey cottage. Each element of the meal told part of their story, weaving together memories and hopes for the future. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing, their dreams, their fears, their favorite books and films, the small details of daily life that couples share. The conversation flowed as naturally as it always had between them, but there was an added depth tonight, an acknowledgement that they were building something lasting and significant. "Do you ever think about the future?" William asked as they lingered over their wine, the question seeming to come from nowhere yet feeling perfectly natural in the moment. Catherine's cheeks flushed slightly, but she met his gaze steadily. "All the time. Especially lately." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think about the kind of life I want to build, the person I want to become. And, increasingly, I find myself imagining that future with you." The honesty in her words took William's breath away. He had known for months that he wanted to spend his life with this remarkable woman, but hearing her echo his own feelings filled him with a joy so intense it was almost overwhelming. He reached across the table to take her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Catherine," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "These past few years with you have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me what it means to be truly loved, not for what I represent or what I can provide, but for who I am underneath all the titles and expectations." She squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. The candlelight danced across his features, highlighting the sincerity in his eyes and the slight tremor in his voice that revealed just how much this moment meant to him. "I brought you here because this place represents everything I am, the history, the responsibility, the weight of tradition. But also the possibility of new beginnings, of love that endures across the generations." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I wanted you to see all of this, to understand what being with me would truly mean, before I asked you the most important question of my life." Catherine's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. The fairy tale setting, the intimate dinner, the raw emotion in William's voice, everything was leading to this moment she had dreamed about but never quite believed would come. As the evening drew to a close, they walked hand in hand through the moonlit corridors of the castle, their footsteps echoing softly in the ancient halls. The weight of history surrounded them, but, rather than feeling daunting, it felt like a blessing, as if all the love stories that had unfolded within these walls were offering their support and encouragement. They paused before a window that looked out over the castle grounds, the landscape bathed in silver moonlight. In the distance, the lights of Windsor town twinkled like earthbound stars, reminding them of the world beyond the castle walls yet somehow making their private moment feel even more precious. "Thank you," Catherine whispered, leaning into William's warmth as his arms encircled her. "For bringing me here, for sharing this with me. I feel like I understand you so much better now." William pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "This is just the beginning, Catherine. If you're willing, I want to share everything with you, not just the beautiful moments like this, but all of it. The responsibilities, the scrutiny, the challenges that come with this life." She turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. "I've known from the beginning that loving you would mean accepting all of that. And I do, William. I accept it because I love you, and because I believe in what we can build together." Their kiss in the moonlight was gentle yet passionate, a promise of all the tomorrows they would share. Around them, the ancient stones of Windsor Castle seemed to whisper their approval, adding William and Catherine's love story to the countless others that had unfolded within these walls. As they finally made their way to their separate quarters, propriety still demanded certain observances. Even in private, both felt the electric anticipation of what the next day might bring. William's hand lingered on Catherine's as they said goodnight, neither wanting to break the spell that had been woven around them. Catherine lay awake for hours that night, staring up at the canopied ceiling of her guest room and replaying every moment of the evening. The weight of William's words, the intensity of his gaze, the promise implicit in every touch, everything pointed to a future that both thrilled and terrified her. She thought about the memorial they had viewed in the chapel, the love story that had endured for 62 years through every imaginable trial. Could she and William build something equally strong and lasting? Meanwhile, in his own chambers, William was making final preparations for what he hoped would be the most important day of his life. Hidden in a velvet box was his grandmother's engagement ring, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds that had adorned the hand of one of history's most beloved queens. The ring represented not just his proposal, but his commitment to honoring the legacy of love and service that defined his family. As dawn broke over Windsor Castle, painting the ancient stones in shades of gold and rose, both William and Catherine awoke with the same thought: today would change everything. The fairy tale that had begun with a shy university student and a charming prince was about to enter its next chapter, one that would capture the imagination of the world and prove that true love could indeed conquer all. The stage was set for a proposal that would be talked about for generations, a moment of pure romance that would remind the world that even in an age of cynicism and doubt, love stories worthy of fairy tales could still come true. Windsor Castle, with all its history and grandeur, waited to witness the beginning of a new royal love story that would touch hearts around the globe. The second day at Windsor Castle dawned crisp and clear, with autumn sunlight streaming through the tall windows of Catherine's guest room. She had awakened early, her mind buzzing with anticipation and a strange mix of excitement and nervousness that she couldn't quite shake. Something about the way William had spoken to her the night before, the intensity in his eyes, the careful planning of every detail, it all suggested that today would be unlike any other. After breakfast served on delicate china in a sun-filled morning room, William suggested they explore the private sections of Windsor Great Park. Catherine agreed eagerly, grateful for the chance to walk off some of her nervous energy. They set out together, wrapped in warm coats against the October chill, their breath creating small clouds in the crisp air. The park stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of autumn colors that took Catherine's breath away. Ancient oak trees stood like sentinels along their path, their leaves painted in brilliant shades of gold, amber, and deep red. William pointed out landmarks as they walked, the statue commemorating his great-great-grandfather, the pond where he had learned to sail toy boats as a child, the hill where he had first been taught to ride. "I used to come here when I needed to think," William confided as they paused beside a particularly ancient oak tree. "Especially after my mother died. This tree became my confidant, I suppose. I would sit against its trunk for hours, trying to make sense of everything that had happened." Catherine reached out instinctively, her hand finding his arm. She had learned not to overwhelm him with sympathy when he spoke of his mother, understanding that he needed space to share his grief in his own way. It must have been incredibly difficult, being so young and having to grieve in the public eye. William nodded, his gaze distant as he remembered those dark days. "Harry and I both struggled, but we had each other. And places like this, where we could just be boys dealing with loss, not princes putting on a brave face." He turned to smile at Catherine, the sadness in his eyes softening. "That's one of the many things I love about you, you understand the difference between the public me and the real me. You've never been impressed by the titles or the ceremony. You see the person underneath." They continued walking deeper into the park, following a path that wound through groves of trees and past hidden streams. William seemed to know every inch of the landscape, guiding Catherine to secret clearings and viewpoints that offered breathtaking vistas of the surrounding countryside. The isolation and beauty of their surroundings created an intimate bubble around them, making the rest of the world feel very far away. As they walked, William found himself stealing glances at Catherine, memorizing every detail of this moment. The way the autumn light caught the highlights in her dark hair, the graceful way she moved across the uneven ground, the genuine delight on her face as she discovered each new vista, everything about her filled him with a love so profound it almost hurt. Today was the day he would ask her to be his wife, and the magnitude of that step both thrilled and terrified him. They paused at a small stone bridge that crossed a babbling brook, the water clear enough to see the smooth pebbles on the bottom. Catherine leaned against the stone parapet, breathing in the crisp air and marveling at the peace she felt in this magical place. Windsor Castle was visible in the distance, its towers rising majestically against the blue sky, but here in the park it felt like they were in their own private world. "William," she said softly, not looking at him as she spoke. "Last night, when you talked about the future, about sharing everything with me, did you mean that? He moved to stand beside her, his heart beginning to race. Every word. Catherine, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You've changed everything for me, shown me what real love looks like, what it means to have a true partner. She turned to face him then, her dark eyes searching his face. The life you're offering, it's not just about loving each other, is it? It's about duty, service, living under constant scrutiny. Are you sure you want to ask that of me? William felt a surge of love and admiration for her honesty. Even in this romantic setting, even with her heart clearly invested in their relationship, she was thinking practically about what their future would entail. It was exactly this kind of thoughtfulness and strength that convinced him she was the right person to stand beside him through everything that lay ahead. I'm sure because I can't imagine doing any of it without you, he replied, reaching out to take her hands. Yes, there will be challenges. The media attention alone will be overwhelming at times. But I've watched you handle every difficult situation with such grace and dignity. You have the strength to be not just my wife, but a true partner in everything we'll face. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the gentle babbling of the brook below and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Catherine felt the weight of the decision before her, not just whether to accept William's proposal when it came, but whether she was truly ready for the life that would follow. The love between them was undeniable, but love alone wouldn't be enough to sustain them through the pressures they would face. As if reading her thoughts, William spoke again. I know it's a lot to ask. I know I'm asking you to give up your privacy, your normal life, your dreams of a quiet family existence. But, Catherine, I'm also offering you the chance to make a real difference in the world. Together, we could use our platform to help people, to champion causes that matter, to show that the monarchy can be a force for positive change. His words sparked something in Catherine's heart. She had always felt a calling to help others, to use whatever privileges she had been given in service of something greater than herself. The idea of channeling that desire through royal duties, of having the resources and platform to make a real impact, was incredibly appealing. They continued their walk, eventually arriving at Virginia Water, a stunning lake that reflected the surrounding trees like a mirror. A small boathouse sat at the water's edge, and William suggested they take out one of the rowing boats. Catherine agreed, laughing as he helped her into the small craft with exaggerated gallantry. William rowed them out to the center of the lake, the rhythmic splash of the oars creating a peaceful soundtrack to their conversation. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams for the future, the small everyday things that couples share. But, underneath the casual conversation was an undercurrent of anticipation, both of them aware that they were building toward something momentous. Look, Catherine said suddenly, pointing toward the shore. A family of swans had appeared, gliding gracefully across the water with their cygnets following in a perfect line. They're beautiful. And they mate for life, don't they? William shipped the oars and let the boat drift, watching the elegant birds with Catherine. They do. My grandmother always said that swans were a good omen for lovers. She and my grandfather saw a pair on their honeymoon, and she claimed they brought 60 years of happiness. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. As they watched, the parent swans moved protectively around their young, demonstrating the kind of partnership and shared responsibility that William and Catherine both hoped to achieve in their own lives. After returning the boat, they walked back toward the castle through a different route that took them past the Queen's private garden. The formal beds were still colorful with late-blooming roses and chrysanthemums, and the geometric patterns of the hedgerows created a sense of timeless elegance. William had obtained special permission for Catherine to see this usually off-limits area, another sign of how seriously he was taking their relationship. My grandmother spends hours here, William explained as they strolled along the gravel paths. She says gardening helps her think through difficult decisions. She's given me some of my best advice while deadheading roses. Catherine smiled at the image of the Queen, whom she knew only from formal occasions, working in her garden like any other grandmother. It humanized the monarchy in a way that made the prospect of joining it seem less daunting. As afternoon faded into early evening, they made their way back to the castle for tea. The ritual was served in the blue drawing room, with its magnificent views over the home park. The table was laden with delicate sandwiches, scones with clotted cream and jam, and an array of small cakes that looked almost too beautiful to eat. "This is how I want to remember today," Catherine said, settling back in her chair with her teacup. "Not just the grandeur of the castle or the beauty of the grounds, but this feeling of peace and contentment. Of being exactly where I'm supposed to be." William's heart soared at her words. If she was feeling even half of what he was experiencing, this sense of rightness, of having found their perfect moment, then, he knew his proposal would be received with joy. As they finished their tea, William suggested they take one final walk before dinner. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows across the castle grounds and painting the ancient stones in warm hues. They walked slowly, neither wanting this perfect day to end. Their path led them to the Round Tower, the oldest part of Windsor Castle and its most iconic feature. From the base of the tower, they could see for miles across the countryside, the view encompassing everything from the Thames Valley to the distant hills of Buckinghamshire. It was here, William had decided, that he would propose. "The view from up there is even more spectacular," William said, nodding toward the top of the tower. "Would you like to see it?" Catherine agreed eagerly, and they climbed the narrow stone steps together. The climb was steep and winding, and, by the time they reached the top, both were slightly breathless. But the view that greeted them made the effort worthwhile. The entire countryside spread out before them like a living map. The Thames meandered through the landscape like a silver ribbon, dotted with small boats and bordered by ancient willows. Villages nestled in the valleys, their church spires pointing toward the sky. In the distance, the London skyline was just visible, a reminder of the larger world that lay beyond this perfect pastoral scene. "It's incredible," Catherine breathed, moving to the edge of the battlement to get a better view. "You can see everything from up here. It makes you feel like you're on top of the world." William moved to stand behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "This is where the first William surveyed his kingdom," he said softly. "Where countless kings and queens have stood to look out over their realm and plan for the future." Something in his tone made Catherine turn around, and she found herself looking directly into his eyes. There was an intensity there that made her breath catch, a mixture of love and determination and barely contained emotion that told her this moment was unlike any they had shared before. "Catherine," William began, his voice slightly hoarse with emotion. "Standing here with you, looking out over this land that has been in my family for nearly 1,000 years, I can't help but think about legacy. About the future. About the kind of life I want to build." He took her hands in his, and she could feel them trembling slightly. Her own pulse began to race as she realized what was happening. "You've taught me what love really means," he continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "Not just the passionate, overwhelming feeling, but the quiet certainty that comes from knowing you've found the person you want to face every challenge with. The person who makes you better than you ever thought you could be." Catherine felt tears beginning to well in her eyes as William reached into his jacket pocket. The sight of the small velvet box made everything real, transforming this magical weekend from a romantic getaway into the beginning of the rest of their lives. "Catherine Elizabeth Middleton," William said, dropping to one knee as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold behind him. "Will you marry me?" The ring that emerged from the velvet box took Catherine's breath away. The magnificent sapphire, surrounded by diamonds and set in white gold, caught the last rays of sunlight and seemed to blaze with its own inner fire. But even more beautiful than the ring was the expression on William's face, hope and love and vulnerability all mixed together as he waited for her answer. For a moment, Catherine couldn't speak. The magnitude of what was happening, the beauty of the setting, the love shining in William's eyes, it all overwhelmed her. But then, joy bubbled up from deep within her, pure and undeniable, and she knew with absolute certainty what her answer would be. "Yes," she whispered, and then, louder, "Yes, of course, yes." William's face broke into the most radiant smile she had ever seen as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years just for her. Then, he was on his feet and she was in his arms, spinning around on top of the ancient tower as the sun set spectacularly behind them. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. Catherine held up her hand to admire the ring, still hardly able to believe this was really happening. It was my mother's, William said softly, his thumb tracing over the stone. I wanted her to be part of this moment somehow. I think she would have loved you. Catherine felt fresh tears spring to her eyes at his words. She had never known Princess Diana, but she had always felt a connection to the woman who had loved William first, who had shaped him into the man he had become. I'm honored to wear it, she said simply. And I promise to love you the way she would have wanted someone to love her son, completely, unconditionally, for all the days of my life. As darkness fell over Windsor Castle, William and Catherine remained on the tower, wrapped in each other's arms and planning their future together. Below them, the ancient stones that had witnessed centuries of love stories seemed to glow with approval, welcoming the newest chapter in the ongoing fairy tale of Windsor Castle. The engagement that would captivate the world had begun with a perfect proposal in a perfect setting, proof that sometimes dreams really do come true. The news of William and Catherine's engagement spread across the globe like wildfire, but, for the couple themselves, the hours immediately following the proposal remained blissfully private. They had dinner alone in William's private apartments, sharing intimate conversation punctuated by sudden bursts of laughter and moments when they simply stared at each other in wonder, still hardly able to believe their fairy tale had taken this magical turn. Catherine kept glancing down at her ring, watching how the sapphire caught the candlelight and threw blue sparkles across the white tablecloth. The weight of it on her finger was still foreign, but already she couldn't imagine her hand without it. More than just a piece of jewelry, it represented a promise, a future, and a connection to the woman who had first worn it with such grace and dignity. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, Catherine confessed as they lingered over dessert, neither wanting this perfect evening to end. Everything feels too wonderful to be real. William reached across the table to take her newly adorned hand in his. I know exactly what you mean. I've imagined this moment so many times, but the reality is even better than anything I dreamed. He paused, his expression growing slightly more serious. Catherine, I want you to know that I understand what I'm asking of you. Tomorrow, when we announce our engagement, everything will change. Are you ready for that? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with all the implications they both understood. Catherine had watched from the sidelines as William navigated life in the public eye, had seen the toll that constant scrutiny could take. Now she would be stepping into that spotlight herself, trading her relative anonymity for a life where every outfit choice, every public appearance, every expression would be analyzed and critiqued. I'm terrified, she admitted with characteristic honesty. But I'm also excited. We'll face it together, won't we? That makes all the difference. William brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. Together, he promised. Always together. They spent the rest of the evening making plans and sharing dreams. William told her about the formal process that would unfold over the coming months, meetings with wedding planners, consultations with palace protocol experts, fittings for what would undoubtedly be one of the most scrutinized wedding dresses in history. Catherine shared her hopes for their married life, her desire to use her new platform to make a real difference in the world, particularly in areas close to her heart like children's welfare and mental health awareness. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as preparations began for the official announcement. Catherine had spoken with her parents the night before, their joy and pride evident even through the phone. Michael and Carol Middleton had watched their daughter's relationship with William develop over the years, always supportive but careful not to push or assume anything. Now, knowing their Catherine would one day be queen, they felt a mixture of enormous pride and protective concern. Just remember, darling, her mother had said during their emotional call, no matter what title you might have, you'll always be our Catherine. Don't let anyone change who you are at heart. The formal photoshoot took place in the state apartments, with Catherine wearing a deep blue dress that complemented her engagement ring beautifully. The photographers captured image after image of the happy couple, William's protective hand at Catherine's back, her radiant smile as she gazed up at him. Each shot would soon be analyzed by fashion experts and body language specialists around the world, but, in the moment, they simply felt like two people deeply in love. The official announcement came at precisely 11 o'clock, released simultaneously to news organizations around the world. Within minutes, the story was trending on social media platforms that hadn't even existed when previous royal engagements were announced. Photographs of Catherine began circulating, her fashion choices from years past suddenly taking on new significance as the world rushed to learn everything about the woman who would one day be queen. William's press secretary had prepared Catherine for the media frenzy that would follow, but nothing could have truly readied her for the reality. Outside her family's home in Bucklebury, photographers with telephoto lenses gathered like a small army. Every shop she had ever worked in, every school she had attended, every friend she had ever made suddenly found themselves fielding calls from journalists hungry for any scrap of information about the future princess. The key is to stay calm and remember that this initial surge will die down, William's communication team advised her during a strategy session at Clarence House. Right now, you're the biggest story in the world, but soon enough there will be other news, and the pressure will ease somewhat. Catherine nodded, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions about everything from security protocols to charitable patronages. She approached this new phase of her life with the same methodical preparation she had brought to everything else, determined to represent both William and the institution of the monarchy with dignity and grace. The engagement interview, filmed at Windsor Castle where their love story had reached its crescendo, revealed Catherine's natural poise and William's obvious adoration. They sat close together on an elegant sofa, William's hand resting protectively on Catherine's knee as they spoke about their relationship, their future plans, and the proposal itself. When he got down on one knee, I was completely shocked, Catherine revealed, her eyes sparkling with the memory. We'd been together for so long that I suppose I had started to wonder if this moment would ever come. But the setting was so perfect, so romantic. I couldn't have imagined anything more beautiful. William, meanwhile, spoke about his certainty that Catherine was the right person to stand beside him through all the challenges and joys that lay ahead. She has this incredible strength and warmth, he said, his love evident in every word. I know she'll make not just a wonderful wife, but an exceptional princess and, eventually, queen. The world fell in love with their obvious happiness and Catherine's down-to-earth charm. Here was a woman who had worked regular jobs, who understood the value of hard work and normal life, yet carried herself with the grace and dignity befitting a future queen. Fashion websites crashed as people rushed to identify her engagement dress, and, within hours, similar styles were selling out in shops around the world. The weeks following the announcement became a whirlwind of activity. Catherine moved into a Grace Inn Favour apartment near Kensington Palace, finally, able to live openly as William's fiancée without the careful secrecy that had characterized much of their courtship. She began working with palace staff to prepare for her new role, studying constitutional history, learning about the various organizations she would eventually patron, and receiving coaching in everything from public speaking to protocol for state occasions. One of the most meaningful preparations involved visits to various royal residences, each with its own history and significance. At Buckingham Palace, she walked through the grand staterooms where she would one day host foreign dignitaries and heads of state. The sheer scale of it all was overwhelming, the ballroom that could accommodate 800 guests, the throne room where she would participate in state ceremonies, the portrait gallery lined with paintings of William's ancestors stretching back centuries. It's incredible to think that one day we'll be part of this history, Catherine mused as they stood before a portrait of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, their love story one of the most famous in royal history. The history is important, William agreed, but what matters most is the future we're building. We have the opportunity to show that the monarchy can evolve, can remain relevant and valuable in the modern world. At Sandringham, William's grandmother's beloved country estate, they spent a weekend that felt more relaxed and family-oriented. The Queen, approaching her mid-80s but still sharp and engaged, took particular pleasure in getting to know Catherine better. Over afternoon tea in the elegant drawing room, she shared stories of her own engagement and early marriage, offering advice with the wisdom that came from more than 6 decades on the throne. The secret to a successful royal marriage, the Queen confided with a slight smile, is remembering that before you are anything else, you are partners. The crown is a privilege and a responsibility, but it should never come before your commitment to each other. Catherine treasured these conversations, recognizing them as precious gifts from a woman who had navigated the challenges of royal life longer than anyone. She began to understand that while her future role would involve enormous privilege and responsibility, it was also built on the foundation of service and sacrifice that had defined the royal family for generations. The wedding planning began in earnest, with every detail requiring careful consideration. Westminster Abbey was chosen as the venue, the same church where William's parents had married 30 years earlier. The guest list would include heads of state from around the world, creating security and diplomatic challenges that required months of coordination. Catherine worked closely with wedding planners to ensure that while the occasion would be appropriately grand, it would also reflect her and William's personalities and values. "I want people to see that this is a celebration of love, not just a state occasion," Catherine explained during one planning session. "Yes, it needs to honor tradition and protocol, but, at its heart, it's about William and me promising to love each other for the rest of our lives." The dress became perhaps the most anticipated element of the entire wedding. Catherine worked in secret with Sarah Burton at Alexander McQueen, creating a gown that would honor both tradition and modernity. Every fitting was conducted in complete secrecy, with non-disclosure agreements and security measures that rivaled those for state secrets. The design would need to photograph beautifully from every angle, suit Catherine's figure perfectly, and create a look that would be remembered and emulated for decades to come. As winter turned to spring, the excitement continued to build. Catherine threw herself into her royal education, attending lectures on British history and constitutional law, studying the Commonwealth countries that William would one day serve as head of state, and learning about the various charities and organizations that fell under royal patronage. She also began making her first tentative steps into public life, attending carefully chosen events where she could begin to establish her own identity as a working member of the royal family. Her natural warmth and genuine interest in people made these appearances successful, with even veteran royal watchers commenting on her poise and authenticity. "She has this remarkable ability to make each person she meets feel like they're the most important person in the room," noted one charity worker after Catherine's visit to a children's hospital. "It's not something that can be taught, it's just who she is." The media attention remained intense but gradually became more positive as the public got to know Catherine better. Her family's dignity in handling the scrutiny earned widespread respect, and her own grace under pressure impressed even skeptical observers. Fashion magazines featured her on countless covers, but, increasingly, the focus was on her charitable work and the causes she was beginning to champion. One particularly meaningful event was Catherine's first solo engagement, a visit to an addiction recovery center that aligned with her growing interest in mental health issues. She spent hours talking with both staff and patients, listening to their stories with genuine compassion and asking thoughtful questions about the challenges they faced. "That's when I knew she was going to be something special," William confided to his father after hearing about the visit. "She doesn't just show up and smile for the cameras. She really cares, really connects with people. She's going to bring something important to this role that we haven't seen before." As their wedding day approached, William and Catherine found themselves caught between excitement and nervousness. The scale of the global attention was unlike anything either had experienced, with television networks around the world preparing extensive coverage and millions of people expected to watch the ceremony. Yet underneath all the pageantry and protocol, they held on to the simple truth that had brought them to this point. They were two people who loved each other completely, ready to build a life together based on mutual respect, shared values, and an unshakable commitment to each other and to service. The night before the wedding, as Catherine prepared to say goodbye to her single life, she stood once again at the window of her apartment, looking out toward Windsor Castle in the distance. The place where William had proposed felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been mere months. So much had changed, yet the love they shared remained constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle of Westminster Abbey to marry the man she loved, surrounded by the grandeur of centuries of tradition but grounded in the simple, profound truth of their commitment to each other. The fairy tale that had begun with two university students falling in love was about to enter its next chapter, one that would inspire dreamers and romantics around the world for generations to come. The morning of April 29, 2011, dawned bright and clear in London, as if the weather itself was celebrating the royal wedding that had captured the world's imagination. In her suite at the Goring Hotel, Catherine Middleton was experiencing the surreal calm that often comes before life-changing moments. Surrounded by her closest family and friends, she prepared for the transformation that would see her enter Westminster Abbey as Catherine Middleton and emerge as the Duchess of Cambridge. The wedding dress, kept secret until this very moment, was even more spectacular than the press had imagined. Sarah Burton's creation was a masterpiece of British craftsmanship, featuring intricate lace applique, a 9-foot train, and a delicate beauty that perfectly complemented Catherine's natural elegance. As the final adjustments were made, Catherine caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror and hardly recognized the vision looking back at her. "You look absolutely radiant, darling," her mother, Carol, whispered, tears threatening to spoil her carefully applied makeup. "I've never seen you more beautiful." Catherine's sister Pippa, serving as maid of honor, made final adjustments to the train while Catherine's childhood friends clustered around, all of them emotional at witnessing this fairy tale moment. The Cartier halo tiara, on loan from the Queen, caught the morning light streaming through the hotel windows, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the walls. Meanwhile, at Clarence's house, William was experiencing his own pre-wedding jitters. His brother Harry, acting as best man, had kept him entertained with jokes and stories throughout the morning, but now, as they prepared to leave for Westminster Abbey, the magnitude of what was about to happen settled over them both. "Are you ready for this, brother?" Harry asked as they climbed into the state car that would transport them to the Abbey. William straightened his ceremonial red uniform of the Irish Guards, the same regiment of which he was colonel. The gold braiding and pristine white gloves represented centuries of military tradition, connecting him to generations of his ancestors who had worn similar uniforms on their own wedding days. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," William replied, and, despite his nerves, he meant every word. The thought of seeing Catherine walk down that aisle toward him, of speaking their vows before God and nearly 2 billion viewers worldwide, filled him with a joy so profound it overrode any anxiety. Westminster Abbey began filling with guests early that morning, each arrival scrutinized by the waiting media and eager crowds lining the processional route. Foreign royalty, heads of state, celebrities, and charity workers whom William and Catherine had specifically requested all took their seats in the ancient church. The guest list itself told the story of a couple who valued both tradition and personal connections, including everyone from the Queen of Denmark to William's former nanny. The abbey itself had been transformed for the occasion, with towering arrangements of English trees creating a natural cathedral within the stone walls. Field maples, hornbeam, and birch trees lined the nave, while seasonal English flowers including lily of the valley, sweet William, and hyacinth provided delicate accents. The effect was breathtaking, bringing the beauty of the English countryside into the heart of London. David Beckham and Victoria Beckham took their seats alongside politicians and diplomats, while Elton John chatted with Commonwealth prime ministers. The mix of guests reflected William and Catherine's desire to blend the formal requirements of a state occasion with their personal relationships and shared commitment to charitable causes. As the morning progressed, crowds swelled along the processional route from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey. People had been camping out for days to secure prime viewing spots, many wearing elaborate costumes and carrying homemade signs celebrating the royal couple. The atmosphere was festive and joyful, with strangers sharing food and stories while they waited for history to unfold before their eyes. The Queen arrived at the Abbey in the traditional state Bentley, resplendent in a primrose yellow coat and matching hat designed by Angela Kelly. At 85, she moved with the same dignity and grace that had characterized her public appearances for nearly 6 decades, but those close to her could see the particular joy she felt at witnessing her grandson's happiness. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, accompanied his wife with his usual military bearing, though at 90, he too was moved by the significance of the day. He had watched William grow from a shy boy struggling with his mother's death into a confident young man ready to embrace both love and duty with equal commitment. The moment the world had been waiting for arrived when Catherine's glass coach, the same one used by Princess Diana 30 years earlier, appeared at the Abbey doors. The crowds erupted in cheers as they caught their first glimpse of the bride, her dress visible through the coach windows but still largely mysterious until she would emerge for her walk up the Abbey steps. Michael Middleton, impeccably dressed in morning coat and looking both proud and slightly overwhelmed, helped his daughter from the coach. The first full view of Catherine's dress sent a collective gasp through the assembled crowd and the millions watching on television worldwide. The lace sleeves and bodice created an effect of timeless elegance, while the flowing skirt and train promised to create unforgettable images as she walked down the aisle. "You look perfect, Catherine," her father whispered as they paused at the Abbey entrance. "I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become." Catherine squeezed his arm, drawing strength from his steady presence. Around them, the pageantry unfolded with military precision, the household cavalry in their ceremonial uniforms, the clergy in their finest vestments, the children from the abbey choir dressed in their traditional scarlet and white. Inside the abbey, William had been waiting at the altar for what felt like hours but had been only minutes. When the massive oak doors opened and the fanfare began, his heart stopped. Then, Catherine appeared at the far end of the nave, and everything else faded away. She looked ethereal, almost otherworldly, but, when their eyes met across the length of the abbey, her smile was purely human and completely his. The walk down the aisle took 4 minutes, but, for William, it felt both eternal and instantaneous. He watched Catherine approach with a mixture of awe and overwhelming love, noting how she acknowledged friends and family with subtle nods while maintaining the dignity befitting the occasion. Her train, carried by Pippa and the young bridesmaids, created a river of silk and lace that seemed to float above the ancient stones. When Michael Middleton placed Catherine's hand in William's, the gesture carried the weight of centuries of tradition but also the simple beauty of a father entrusting his daughter's happiness to the man she loved. William's whispered "You look beautiful" was caught by the Abbey's sensitive microphones and transmitted around the world, a private moment shared with millions. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, conducted the service with a perfect blend of solemnity and joy. His words about the nature of marriage, the commitment it required, and the example William and Catherine would set for the nation and Commonwealth resonated throughout the Abbey and beyond. When he spoke about love being patient and kind, never failing even in the face of trials, both William and Catherine felt the truth of those words in their hearts. The exchange of vows was the moment the world had been waiting for. William's voice was strong and clear as he promised to love and cherish Catherine, while her response, delivered with quiet confidence, showed none of the nerves that might have been expected. When William placed his mother's wedding ring on Catherine's finger, followed by the new wedding band crafted from Welsh gold, the symbolism was lost on no one present. The ring exchange was followed by the signing of the registers, conducted in the privacy of St. Edward's Chapel while the congregation and television audience were entertained by the Abbey choir. In those few private moments, William and Catherine shared their first kiss as husband and wife, surrounded only by their immediate families and closest friends. It was a bubble of intimacy within the grand public spectacle, a reminder that at its heart, this was about their love for each other. The recessional, accompanied by the soaring music of Hubert Parry's "I Was Glad," was triumphant and joyful. Catherine's transformation from commoner to duchess was complete, symbolized not just by her new title but by the confidence with which she carried herself as she walked back down the aisle as William's wife. The carriage procession back to Buckingham Palace provided the iconic images that would define the wedding in popular memory. William and Catherine's radiant happiness was evident as they waved to the cheering crowds, Catherine's dress arranged perfectly despite the confines of the 1902 state landau. The sun shone brilliantly, as if blessing their union, and the crowds lining the route created a river of Union Jack flags and celebratory banners. At Buckingham Palace, the balcony appearance drew the largest crowds in the mall's history. When William and Catherine stepped onto the famous balcony, the roar from the crowd below was deafening. Their kiss, sweet and natural despite the formality of the moment, created one of the most watched and replayed moments in television history. The image of the new Duke and Duchess of Cambridge sharing that tender moment, surrounded by their families and watched by the world, perfectly captured the fairy tale nature of their love story. The wedding breakfast that followed was an intimate affair compared to the morning's grand ceremony. 200 guests gathered in the ball supper room at Buckingham Palace, where Prince Charles gave a touching speech about his pride in William and his joy at welcoming Catherine into the family. Prince Harry's best man speech, delivered at the evening reception, was reportedly hilarious and slightly scandalous, though its contents remained private. Catherine changed into a second dress for the evening reception, a flowing white creation by Sarah Burton that was more relaxed and dance-friendly than her ceremonial gown. William shed his military uniform for white tie and tails, and together they looked every inch the romantic leads in their own fairy tale. The evening reception featured dancing to a live band, with William and Catherine's first dance being a closely guarded secret that only their guests were privileged to witness. Friends later reported that despite the grandeur of their surroundings, the couple seemed completely natural and joyful, dancing and laughing as if they were at any other wedding celebration. As the evening wound down, William and Catherine prepared for their departure in Prince Charles's beloved Aston Martin, decorated with balloons and streamers by Prince Harry and bearing a license plate reading JU5T Wed. Their exit from Buckingham Palace in the vintage car provided a perfect ending to a perfect day, combining British style with youthful exuberance. The honeymoon destination remained secret until they were safely away, but reports later confirmed they had chosen the Seychelles, a private paradise where they could finally relax and begin their married life away from the cameras and crowds. The choice reflected their desire for privacy and natural beauty, qualities that had always characterized their relationship. The wedding had exceeded every expectation, creating moments of pure magic that would be remembered and celebrated for decades to come. More than just a royal ceremony, it had been a genuine celebration of love that reminded the world that fairy tales could still come true. The images of Catherine's radiant smile, William's obvious adoration, and their shared joy throughout the day became instant classics, inspiring countless brides and grooms to dream of their own perfect wedding. In the days that followed, the global media proclaimed the wedding a complete success, not just as a spectacle but as a demonstration of the monarchy's continued relevance and ability to inspire. Catherine's grace under pressure, her family's dignity, and the couple's obvious happiness had won over even skeptical observers. The marriage of William and Catherine had begun not just with pageantry and protocol, but with the simple, timeless beauty of two people promising to love each other forever. It was a promise they made not just to each other, but to the world watching, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter in the ongoing story of the British royal family. The years following their fairy tale wedding transformed William and Catherine from newlyweds into one of the world's most beloved royal couples, their love story continuing to unfold in ways that captured hearts and inspired millions. Their return from honeymoon marked the beginning of their real work as senior members of the royal family, and Catherine's transition from Duchess in training to confident royal proved to be as graceful as everything else about their relationship. Their first official residence as a married couple was a modest cottage on the grounds of Kensington Palace, a deliberate choice that reflected their desire to maintain some semblance of normal married life despite their extraordinary circumstances. Catherine threw herself into making their home warm and welcoming, combining royal antiques with personal touches that made the space uniquely theirs. Friends who visited described a surprisingly cozy environment where William could shed his formal persona and simply be a husband enjoying quiet evenings with his wife. The early months of marriage were spent finding their rhythm as both a couple and a working partnership. Catherine's first solo engagements as the Duchess of Cambridge revealed a natural ability to connect with people that reminded many observers of Princess Diana, though Catherine's approach was distinctly her own. She brought a calm warmth to every interaction, listening intently to the people she met and asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in their lives and work. One of Catherine's most significant early decisions was her choice of charitable patronages. Rather than simply accepting traditional royal causes, she spent months researching organizations and meeting with experts to understand where she could make the most meaningful impact. Her selection of charities focused on children's welfare, mental health, and the arts, reflecting both her personal interests and her desire to address issues that truly mattered to modern families. The couple's first major overseas tour took them to Canada, a Commonwealth country where they could hone their diplomatic skills in a relatively friendly environment. The tour was a resounding success, with Catherine's fashion choices making headlines around the world while her substantive engagements demonstrated her growing confidence in her royal role. William, meanwhile, showed a protective pride in his wife that was evident to everyone who watched them together. "She's a natural," one seasoned royal correspondent observed after watching Catherine navigate a particularly challenging event with multiple dignitaries and complicated protocol. "You can see how much thought she puts into every interaction, but it never feels forced or artificial. She genuinely cares about the people she meets." The announcement of Catherine's first pregnancy in late 2012 sent the world into celebration mode. The news came earlier than the couple had planned after Catherine was hospitalized with severe morning sickness, but their joy was evident despite the unwanted publicity. William's devotion during Catherine's difficult first trimester showed the world yet another facet of their relationship, his fierce protectiveness and tender care for his wife. Prince George's birth in July 2013 marked a new chapter in both their love story and their royal duties. The sight of William and Catherine emerging from the hospital with their newborn son, Catherine radiant despite having given birth hours earlier, created one of the most watched moments in modern royal history. William's careful attention to Catherine, his obvious pride in his new family, and their shared joy made it impossible for even the most cynical observers to doubt the authenticity of their happiness. Parenthood suited both of them beautifully. William, who had always been wonderful with children during public engagements, proved to be a devoted and hands-on father. Catherine, meanwhile, brought to motherhood the same thoughtful preparation she had applied to everything else in her royal life. She studied child development, consulted with experts, and made decisions about George's upbringing that balanced royal tradition with modern parenting approaches. Their move to Anmer Hall, a country house on the Sandringham estate, reflected their desire to give their children as normal a childhood as possible. The Georgian mansion, a wedding gift from the Queen, became their private sanctuary where they could enjoy family life away from the constant attention of London. Catherine was often seen pushing George's pram through the Norfolk countryside, while William took on more of the cooking duties, a skill he had developed during their university years. The birth of Princess Charlotte in 2015 completed what Catherine laughingly called their practice family, though everyone who knew them understood that they hoped for more children. Charlotte's arrival was marked by the same joy and celebration as George's, but this time Catherine and William seemed more relaxed, confident in their parenting skills and secure in their ability to protect their children's privacy while fulfilling their public duties. Their working partnership had evolved into something truly special by this point. Catherine had developed her own areas of expertise, particularly in early childhood development and mental health awareness. Her speeches, once tentative and carefully rehearsed, became more confident and personal as she shared her own experiences and observations. William, meanwhile, had found his voice as an advocate for environmental causes and mental health awareness, often working alongside Catherine on initiatives that combined their interests. One particularly meaningful project was their work together on the Heads Together campaign, which aimed to change the conversation around mental health. Their willingness to speak openly about their own struggles, including William's challenges following his mother's death and Catherine's experiences with the pressures of royal life, helped break down barriers and encourage others to seek help when needed. What makes them so effective, noted one charity worker who had collaborated with both of them, is that they genuinely listen to each other and build on each other's strengths. You can see how much they respect each other's opinions and how they work together to make their initiatives more impactful. The arrival of Prince Louis in 2018 brought their family to what they described as completion, though Catherine admitted that both she and William had been tempted to have even more children. Louis's birth was notable not just for the joy it brought the family, but for how confidently Catherine handled the media attention, emerging from the hospital looking radiant and relaxed just hours after giving birth. By this point, Catherine had truly found her voice as a member of the royal family. Her engagements were consistently well received, her speeches were increasingly personal and impactful, and her fashion choices, while still scrutinized, were seen as supporting British designers and reflecting a more accessible approach to royal style. She had managed to carve out her own identity within the institution while supporting William and honoring the traditions that came with her role. Their 10th wedding anniversary in 2021 was marked by the release of new photographs that showed a couple completely comfortable with each other and their roles. Gone was any trace of the nervousness that had occasionally been evident in their early years. In its place was a mature partnership built on deep love, mutual respect, and shared commitment to their family and their duties. The challenges they faced together, from media scrutiny to family difficulties to the global pandemic that reshaped everyone's lives, only seemed to strengthen their bond. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, they adapted to working from home like couples everywhere, though their home office happened to be in a palace. Their virtual engagements showed glimpses of their domestic life that endeared them even further to the public, particularly moments when one of the children would interrupt a video call or when they had to navigate technical difficulties like any other couple adjusting to remote work. Catherine's evolution from a shy university student to a confident future queen consort was complete, but she never lost the qualities that had first attracted William: her warmth, her genuineness, her ability to make others feel valued and heard. William, meanwhile, had grown into his role as a future king with Catherine's steady support, developing the confidence and gravitas needed for the role he would one day inherit. Their love story became a template for modern royal marriages, showing how tradition and contemporary values could coexist successfully. They demonstrated that it was possible to serve the institution of the monarchy while maintaining a strong personal relationship and raising children who understood both their privileges and their responsibilities. The impact of their Windsor love story extended far beyond their personal happiness. Their wedding had provided a moment of joy and optimism during challenging economic times. Their charitable work had raised awareness and funds for causes that might otherwise have struggled for attention, and their approach to royal duties had helped modernize and humanize the monarchy for a new generation. As they looked toward the future, with William's eventual accession to the throne and Catherine's role as queen consort, they faced it together with the same partnership that had carried them through their university years, their long courtship, their magical engagement at Windsor Castle, and their fairy tale wedding. Their love story had proved that sometimes, against all odds, real life could be even better than any fairy tale. The images of their engagement at Windsor Castle, with Catherine radiant in William's arms as the sun set behind the ancient towers, had become iconic symbols of enduring love. That moment, when a nervous prince proposed to the woman who had captured his heart, marked not just the beginning of their marriage but the continuation of a love story that would inspire generations to come. Their children, growing up with parents who clearly adored each other and found joy in both their public duties and their private moments, would inherit not just titles and responsibilities but a template for how love, commitment, and service could create a life of meaning and happiness. The legacy of William and Catherine's Windsor love story would live on in their children and in the countless people around the world who had been touched by their example of what true partnership could achieve. The castle where it all began continued to hold special significance for them. They returned regularly for family occasions and official events, and each time, they were reminded of that perfect evening when their future together had crystallized into a promise. Windsor Castle, with its centuries of love stories and royal history, had provided the perfect setting for the proposal that launched one of the most beloved royal romances of the modern era. In a world often cynical about love and skeptical about fairy tales, William and Catherine's story served as a reminder that true love could indeed conquer all, that two people committed to each other and to something larger than themselves could create something beautiful and lasting. Their Windsor love story had captivated the internet overnight and continued to inspire dreamers and romantics everywhere, proving that the best fairy tales are the ones that come true.